Hey, Work Positive Nation, most likely your company culture includes a sales team because everyone needs to sell stuff, right? A product or a service. So how would you describe the culture within that sales team? Would you say they're self-motivating? Are they integrity-driven? My guest today is a globally recognized expert in creating sales cultures that self-motivate and are integrity-driven. This guy's taken his vision for this kind of sales culture to more than 25 countries and 5 continents, where he consults with small startups to global giants. Besides all this, he's a great guy too. So get ready, Work Positive Nation, for this amazing episode of the Work Positive Podcast.
Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Joey Faucette. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Work Positive Nation, help me welcome the sales hunter, the man, the myth, the legend, my friend, Mark Hunter. Mark, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast.
Well, thank you. And hopefully I'll live up to that reputation, or however you built me up. I don't know, man. This could be an interesting show. Could be a short show, you know?
Many are called, few are chosen to be the Mark Hunter.
There you go.
It's kind of like,
it is trademarked, so don't steal it. Okay.
Well, it's not Home Depot, it's the Home Depot, right?
That's right.
Have you noticed that? And in the South, where I live and you live, Walmart has become the Walmart, right? So, and I suppose I should say at this point that the Home Depot nor the Walmart gave us anything for mentioning them today, did they? At least they didn't me, did they you?
Well, I won't disclose that until the end of the show, so...
I hear you, man. Let's talk about sales culture, because every company has got to sell some stuff. It's got to be a product. It's got to be a service. But if you're going to stay in business, right, you got to sell some stuff. And yet sales cultures, they can be a little sticky sometimes, can't they, Mark?
Yeah, you sure can, because culture cuts so many different ways. It cuts, between the salesperson and the customer. Because really think about it. Many times the customer's only interaction with the company is with the salesperson. Absolutely. So guess what? That salesperson better be putting on a good game face. But that game face is driven by how that salesperson is treated within their company. And if they're not treated well, guess what? They're not going to treat their customers well. Kind of a simple formula there. Treat your salespeople right, and maybe then they'll treat your customers right.
They may be right. Simple, but not easy, because we've seen it done every way from Sunday, right?
Yeah, we have, because here's the thing. What drives one person's culture does not drive another person's culture. I mean, we can sit here and we can say, oh, wow, we have a great company culture. Well, it's a company culture that's geared for this type of individual, but not for that type of individual. And these are all these little paradoxes, so to speak, that from a sales manager standpoint, you've got to understand, how do you truly, because culture from a sales perspective is a key driver of motivation. And if I'm going to motivate my people, I got to understand what's going to drive them, so I know how to frame up the culture. Because the culture is that unwritten, unseen, unfelt. No, it's felt. Well, and it's felt every day. Is that salesperson? Man, I'll tell you what, I can tell you stories. And I write about them in my last book of mine for sales, about a sales manager in particular who really created an unbelievable culture. And as a result, I and everybody else would walk through a wall for this guy. Yeah, we would walk through a wall for him. Conversely, I've had other managers. I'd build a wall real quickly.
Throw things over it at them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think Sherm says 57% of all of us leave a job because of a manager we'd build a wall for and lob stuff over, right? So yes. You mentioned one of your magic words that you talk about in your podcast, The Sales Hunter. You talk about it in your books, Mind for Sales and the prospecting book. And that's self-motivating. So let's take a minute and unpack that, because one of the things we like to do in Work Positive Nation is to attract top talent And then as we attract them, we want to reduce team turnover. We want them to stay on our teams. And as our regular listeners know, we talk a lot about one of the keys to attracting top talent is to be the top talent which you wish to attract, because this is not a recruitment job where you're trying to sell somebody a bill of goods, right? Just come to our company to get a warm body through the door. But instead, we want to attract the type of people that we want to work with, and we want to work for us as we're sales managers. So self-motivating, it seems to me that, and I understand exactly what you mean, but it seems to me all motivation must be internal. It must be from the self. Now, I can stimulate you, I can manipulate you, right? I have those two choices. How does the role of motivation play into attracting top talent and reducing team turnover, Mark?
Well, it's huge. And let's first unpack self-motivation.
Please.
And I love sharing this with sales managers, and I'm going to share this, and some people might cringe at it. Sales managers, any manager, you can't motivate your people. Nope. You cannot motivate your people. All you can do is create an environment for them to motivate themselves. That's all you can do.
Totally.
Now, self-motivation is driven by a number of factors. And all we can control from a manager standpoint is the business, the professional, what their work life is. We don't know what their home life is. And don't sit there and say we separate the two. Oh, no. If it's not going good at home, it bleeds over to work.
And if things aren't going well at work, it goes home with you.
You bet it does. So as a manager, what I have to do is I have to create an environment where I am understanding and empathetic to the challenges you're facing in your life. Now, this isn't a pass. This isn't no. This is a challenge to rise up. Accountability is one of the key things of motivation. We are not motivated until we are willing to be accountable, either to ourselves or to somebody else. So it starts with you, the manager. And I hate using the term manager. I want to say leader. We manage inanimate objects. We lead people. So that leader, you have to be willing to hold your people accountable, which means, guess what? You have to be held accountable, because your people will read through and see you in a heartbeat. I was having this conversation today with a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, complaining about his VP of sales. And I know all the parties involved very well. And the VP of sales is just ripping on all of this person's direct reports, and yet is not willing to be held accountable themselves. Guess what? That's a train that's going to run off the tracks pretty quickly.
That's what has.
The CRO. Yeah,
recognized it yet.
Right. I mean, so again, volume is not happening. Deals are not being done. Stuff is not functioning. And because leadership starts at the top, and it has to be transparent. If you as a leader are not willing to be transparent, people are going to smell it out real quickly.
Yeah, and they're going to call the inauthenticity of that, and particularly the millennials and the Gen Zers. They're just not going to stand for it. They'll find work somewhere else. So I can stimulate or I can manipulate, but you choose to motivate yourself. And so part of my role as a leader of a sales team to create a work positive culture among them is to make sure I'm understanding and empathetic. What does it look like, Mark Hunter, when a sales leader is understanding and empathetic?
Well, it's interesting. Lou Holtz, retired football coach now, he was asked, and he, of course, Notre Dame led them to a national championship. He's very phenomenal coach. He was asked.
I just want to note one thing here. He was at NC State and learned how to be a great coach before he went to Notre Dame. Not that I went to NC State.
Well, he did a little pass through there with the New York Jets, which was a dismal failure.
He got over that.
And he did a little stint in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But you're right. Okay, this isn't a football show. Anyway, he was asked one time, how do you motivate 120 people? And his answer was 120 different ways.
Yeah.
Because each person has their own set of values, their own set of circumstances. Now, this isn't to sit there and create 120 different organizational structures. No. But it's understanding what are the motivators, what are the drivers for each individual person. And if you think about it, if you've got kids, you understand that. Because I've got a couple kids and they were driven by different factors. And there were different buttons you had to push. And a good leader understands how to push those buttons, not from a parental role, but from a lifting up role, because it absolutely helps take them to a different level. Because my whole objective is to just set the environment for you to motivate yourself. When you do that, it's amazing at what happens.
You're setting the table for them, but you can't eat the meal. So
yes,
you make it
absolutely. That's a great way to look at it.
Well, if you find out what kind of foods I prefer, what ethnicity, my favorite food is, whatever it is, and then you prepare the table the way that I want it. Now, somebody's listening to that and they're thinking, "Oh man, that's a lot of work."
No, but here's the thing. It actually speeds up the process, because you may have some direct reports who really, it's best for you to talk with them in the morning. There are others that it may be best for you to talk with them in the afternoon. You yourself might not want to be talked to in the afternoon. One of the things that I always tell salespeople is you have to understand what motivates your manager. It's your goal to find out when is the best time to communicate with my leader. When is the best time? And these are just little nuances that a good leader learns. But here's the thing. Does it take more time? Yes, but the reward is absolutely huge. Because if I have two people and one of them only really is the type of person that if I'm going to have one-on-one dialogue, I got to do it in the morning. The other one is not do it in the morning. I got to do it late in the afternoon. If I just understand those two things and how I communicate with them, it is amazing at what those two people will go out and do. Remember, the sum of the results is not what you, the leader, can accomplish. The sum of the results is what your people can accomplish without you being engaged. That's huge.
And that's the heart and soul of empathy, really. And of course, understanding preceding empathy. So it takes some time, Mark, if I'm attracting top talent and reducing team turnover, it takes some time. So that means I got to slow down a little bit, but it actually speeds up the success results because I'm forming relationships to know what their favorite food is and to prepare the table with their best meal, whether they like breakfast or dinner better, for instance. So what are some keys that I, as a sales leader in wanting to create a work positive culture that is a sales hunter type culture? What are some of the keys? What should I be doing daily to form these kinds of relationships?
Yeah, here's the key. It's understanding what motivates them. We talked about that already, but understand their communication patterns, understand their communication methods. Are they ones who want to communicate through voice, through words, or by actions? And I've got to be able to deliver in that mode. Remember, this is no different than with a customer. With a customer, I say the best way to develop the customer is to understand how best to communicate with them using their communication methods. Same thing as a leader. You have to understand what works for them, and you have to drive that home. So yes, it does. So what this may mean is the fact that you may have one person in particular who just really has a self-esteem problem. Fine. Okay. So what do I have to do? I may have to reach out to them in the morning for a 30-second phone call, or maybe it's just an email. Hey, congratulations on what you did yesterday. And then maybe you call them up at 4:00 in the afternoon, or you reach out to them at 4:00 in the afternoon and say, hey, how'd your day go? Share with me. Because again, you're helping them in their self-esteem. And what you're doing is you don't want to get in the habit of doing that. But you want them to see, hey, you know what I want you to do? I want you every day at 4:00 to take out a piece of paper and jot down what were your successes for the day and pat yourself on the back. You see, if you motivate individually properly, you will demonstrate to them how to motivate themselves. So we may have some. Yeah. I mean,
one of the keys then in that attraction of top talent process is to discover the candidate's preferred communication style, time of day, and begin using that and then say, okay, here's what I discovered about you. Now I'm going to continue to do that. So discovering that early on in the conversation in your relationship then morphs right on into how you reduce team turnover because you're keeping them on the team. Here's what I noticed. Want to make sure it's accurate. Does this work for you? It's what I observed in our attraction process. How's that working? I love that. And it really builds continuity in the relationship because at the end of the day, that's what you want your sales team to do, is to form relationships with customers and clients, right? That
is so key because, let's go back to this whole piece here. if I'm trying to motivate somebody and trying to keep talent, because there are certain things, because again, I'm bringing this talent in and I want them to stay. There's some talent that you may have to work to take projects off their plate. But there are other people who they may salivate. They may love doing that project. So guess what? As you're looking for things to get done, you're looking for, hey, I'm going to assign this task to that person. I'm not going to assign it to that person. I'm going to have them doing something else. So again, it's crafting a team. Let's go back to the football analogy. There are 11 players on the field. They all play different positions. I can't have 11 quarterbacks. I can't have 11 wide receivers.
Yep.
I've got to have each person. And again, this is what a good leader's doing. You're really a symphony conductor. And when you're conducting the orchestra right, it's amazing the music that is played, because each instrument knows when it's their turn to be loud or their turn to be soft. And they know I'm carrying the melody, I'm carrying the harmony. They know the different pieces. And this is the thing. Great leaders communicate well. The organization understands the objectives, the priorities, and why the objectives are what they are, why the priorities are what they are, what the end goal is. You cannot over-communicate. Well, you can over-communicate, but it rarely happens.
No, wait a minute, Mark. You can talk too much and run out of something to say, but you can't over-communicate, right?
Yeah, that's the piece. But what I found is the majority of managers fail to communicate.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what they do is, because they know, their people know. There's a little piece I call the founder's dilemma. Okay. Founder, the person who founds a company.
Sure.
We'll say it certain. And they have this dilemma that every person is working for that company because they want to become the next Steve Jobs and it's billion. No, many of those people are just there because it's a job.
Yep.
And they don't understand that. And it's hard for them to put themselves into the shoes of their employees. And I call it the founder's dilemma. And that's why founders many times make very bad managers.
Their giftedness is great for founding, but not for leading and managing.
Right.
Mark Hunter is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. Mark, while the Work Positive Nation is listening, what website can they go to and start leafing through to learn more about you?
Sure. It's thesaleshunter.com. Now, there's a lot of market research that went into that. When we went to get the domain name, Sales Hunter was taken, so we just put a "the" in front of it. And so, hey, why not the Sales Hunter?
That domain was available.
that is market research at its finest.
Critical insights, all right?
Critical insights.
All right.
And oh, by the way, the Sales Hunter is trademarked now, so don't steal it, right?
Okay, all right. So I'll make sure legal teams are standing by to see if
That's right.
Work Positive Nation. Okay, so we've talked about motivation, which at its heart is self-motivation, and how we can build a sales culture that really taps into, stimulates as opposed to manipulates the best in attracting and reducing this amazing sales team that we put together. Let's talk about making this team integrity driven. First of all, define for us, Mark, what you mean by integrity driven.
Anybody can demonstrate integrity when they're in front of everybody. Integrity is what's done when nobody's watching. Now stop and think about this, because I've had bosses that incredibly integrity centered. And you see that in other actions. You see that in how they hold themselves up. There's a CEO that I worked with for a while, and I won't go through the entire story, but I made a comment because he was incredibly nice to people and incredibly integrity centered. He said, here's the reason I do this, because when I'm integrity centered and I'm nice to people, I make better decisions. And if you knew the history of this CEO, he was also on the board of directors of several very significant Fortune 500 companies. They went through some very difficult times of CEO transitions and major acquisitions and so forth. And for him to survive that long and be such a stellar leader in so many different organizations, that speaks volumes. But he was all about integrity. And I asked him, I said, how do you define integrity? Integrity, it was very simple. He said, integrity is very simply doing what my mother would expect of me if she was sitting right here with me. And think about this. This was coming from a CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
That's what
I mean. They had their fleet of planes, helicopters, everything. And it's like he says, integrity is doing it the way your mom would want you to if she was sitting right here. Wow.
So integrity is making mama proud.
Integrity is making mama proud. But see, here's the whole thing. You know what's funny? It's a lot less stressful to be integrity centered. Because think about this for a moment, because I see people where they go through and they hedge on this, hedge on that. And once you start hedging, once you start doing that, now you're playing games.
Slippery slope.
And now you got to remember what games you've played. You have to remember what games you played.
With whom?
With whom you've played them. And when you are integrity centered, it's amazing how much better you sleep at night. You sleep really good, and there's a lot less stress. And this is what this CEO was telling me. He says, I make better decisions because I don't have to worry about any of this positioning or any of this gamesmanship. And again, if I called out the corporations that he was on the board of directors of, you'd recognize them.
Yeah. And we like doing business. We like buying from people that have that kind of consistent center. I mean, like every time you and I are together, I know what I'm going to get with Mark, and Mark knows what he's going to get with Joey. We don't hide. We don't play peekaboo. We don't build those walls and lob things around. It's just who we are and the way we are. Yeah. So there's that ethical consistency that, is driven by the integrity of our relationship. What difference does that make in creating a positive work culture for a team? Let's say I'm the leader.
Yeah, it's huge because it says truth can be spoken to be able to come out. And I worked for a boss one time, I'll never forget it. And I made a mistake. I made a big mistake. And I watched him try to cover it up. What did that tell me? He didn't have integrity.
Wow.
I mean, and I wanted him to just throw me under the bus. I'm a big boy. Blame me. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
I blew it.
We'll work our way through this. But he crafted this whole big, and it's like, really? And what's interesting is I lost a tremendous amount of respect for him. See, this comes back to accountability. See, he wasn't willing to be accountable to me and hold me accountable. I don't think you can demonstrate integrity in an organization without practicing accountability at all levels.
Without every single one of them being a part of daily activity, because it's caught, right? I mean, I guess you can teach it, but it's caught. You observed him, your leader, in that situation. And so others are observing you. Now, what about those times when you're making decisions and it's not necessarily in the light of day? It's not in a team meeting. It's not in a report. It's not on a Zoom call. What about those that you're making behind a closed door? How did those become apparent to your sales team?
Well, they do become apparent because it bleeds over into your activity. You know, when the police officer pulls you over for speeding and you go, officer, this is the first time I've ever been speeding. The officer wants to say to himself, liar, liar, pants on fire. It's just the first time you've been caught. I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, you can't sit here and play one person behind closed doors and think publicly you're going to be a different person. It bleeds itself in. Millennials and Gen X, they're great. They're great at sniffing out fraud. Boy, they're great at sniffing out fraud. And in the words of Warren Buffett, reputation takes a lifetime to create, and yet you can lose it in a second. Now, I didn't quote him properly on that, we lose our reputation in a second. And remember, your reputation is not what you think it is. Your reputation is what others think of you.
It's what
I see a lot of leaders who think they're absolutely great, and their people can't stand them. Something's wrong here, folks. Somebody
you built that wall, right? So whom are you really leading at that point? Not a whole lot. And so if you're trying to build a work positive sales culture, you got to stop playing peekaboo. You got to destruct the wall. And again, we're back to relationships, right? So if I want to create this integrity driven process, how do I display that integrity in the attraction of top talent as well as the team dynamic so that I reduce my team turnover?
Well, it's you do this in several different ways. I'm gonna share a couple real quick. First of all, you elevate your people. You celebrate the success of your people. You elevate them. Demonstrating integrity, demonstrating a leadership is what I refer to as you have to have a big ego. Now, people are freaking out. Ego. No, I'm sorry, not EGO, empowering greater outcomes. Your objective as a leader is to raise up people who can achieve greatness on their own without you. How do you go about doing that? Because your people have to see you doing this in even the most subtle situations. One of the things I love doing is I'm out working with somebody. Let's go by Starbucks. See how that person treats the barista. You're sitting down for lunch. How are they treating the wait staff? How are they treating this? I see, integrity centered, and you see this in leaders. Leaders, integrity centered is about playing the long game. I'm going to hold people accountable for the short game, but I play the long game. I know what is the end result. And there may be an action or something like this. Maybe a meal doesn't get served right or something like that. And it's just relax. It's okay. I used to have an expression. People would walk into my office when I was in my corporate role. And I had an expression. The sun is still going to come up in the morning. The sun is still going to just relax.
Yeah. And
my other line was, nothing we do here today is going to change the course of mankind tomorrow. That's right. It just isn't.
It's not that big a deal.
Right? Just breathe. Just breathe.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's amazing how I think it changes your own temperament. And when you change your own temperament, it changes how you communicate. Because we've all seen this with kids. We see this in organizations. When you dial up your voice, those around you dial up their voice.
I love it when somebody tries to get a toddler to use their quote unquote inside voice by yelling at them and using their own outside voice.
Yeah.
How's that working out for you? Go to them and whisper, and then you're really setting the proper tone. Mark Hunter is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. Work Positive Nation's already gone to the saleshunter.com, at least those who aren't walking a dog or on Peloton or something. What are we going to find when we go to the saleshunter.com, Mark?
Well, you're going to find a Peloton and a dog to walk. So no. What you're going to find is you're going to find ebooks that you can download. You're going to find videos that you can grab. There's a blog post. There's a ton of content out there. My whole belief is this: sales is not a solo activity. Sales is a team sport. It's our job to help elevate everybody. So, my role in sales is how do I elevate? And if you think about this, you've got a lot of people listening to this that aren't in sales. But here's, economy is driven by business. Business is driven by sales. So guess what?
Right.
We got to get sales right, or we don't have an economy. So
that's right. That's right.
And at the end of the day, even that toddler is selling something.
Absolutely.
We are all selling something, and it starts by demonstrating a level of respect and listening. Just listen to the other person.
Yeah, cool. She's selling pops on getting a snack. That's what my toddlers do. My granddaughters do. So we're all selling something at the end of the day. Great. The saleshunter.com is where you want to go right now. Mark, tell us about the podcast that you do with Meredith.
Yes. Well, I actually do two of them. One is Sales Logic podcast every Saturday morning. This is crazy, but you talk about discipline. Every Saturday morning at 7 a.m., Meredith, Elliot Powell, myself, we do a 26-minute show. And this is regardless of where we are in the world. I've been in Lithuania, I've been in Japan, she's been in Spain, but it's always 7 a.m. Central Time. And we do that for a very intentional reason, because we want to show that one of the keys to success is just the discipline. Not just in sales, but in everything. So Sales Logic podcast, we just discuss a common topic. Okay. We have a kind of a top 10 list where we kind of go through 10 tips and ideas. We answer a listener question, and we talk about a book. And when we do that in about 26 minutes.
Sweet. Sweet. That's great. Thanks, Sid. And we can find that wherever fine podcasts are heard, right?
You are correct.
Wonderful.
And a new episode is released every Tuesday.
Nice. I'm loving it. Work Positive Nation always wants to know from my guest, Mark Hunter, about one thing they can do today to start creating a positive work culture. So, Mark Hunter, what's your one thing?
Respect other people. Just respect. And respect starts by shutting up and listening.
That's what it looks and sounds like. Beautiful. I absolutely love it. Mark Hunter is my guest today on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. TheSalesHunter.com is where you can go. Give us the titles of your two books again, please, Mark.
Title of the book's High Profit Prospecting, and my newest book, A Mind for Sales.
Wonderful. And those are available wherever fine books are sold. Thank you so much for the gift of your wisdom. Man, it's always great to see you, to be with you, and to have excellent conversations like this. And every time we talk, it's like this. So thanks so much for your time and wisdom today, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.